Yeah, we're live. We are live. 706. 706. Just like the cylinder heads. Best Chevy cylinder heads ever made in the history of existence. Not really. So how is everybody doing? The guys, excuse me. The guys that were here earlier, because this is the third live feed. The guys that were here earlier got to see Jimmy and I doing a new stream so that I could do, we were testing it out to make sure that we were going to be able to do in the future. In fact, I already talked to Brian Tooley about it, about doing interviews. So we can now do that. And so I did one with, first with Jimmy, my safety interview. And Jimmy's awesome because he did HP Performance, and they did a ton of different turbo stuff. And I did a bunch of testing with him all the way from back in the day till now. He's got that Turbo NSX with a J series in it. He's working on a lot of cool things. We're going to be doing a lot of cool testing on the chassis dyno over at his place, which will be awesome. Do the Omni, do his NSX, do a bunch of different size turbo stuff, and then the LS powered Mustang, which would be good because lots of guys want to know about that. But honestly, when I was talking to Jimmy, I'm like, yeah, the store is primarily LS stuff right now. But if we're selling turbos and we're testing the turbos and they're going to do what I think that the turbo is going to do based on the designs of the turbos that we're looking at and what I think those wheels and housings will do, then the turbos obviously are going to be good for way more than just putting on an LS. There's lots of stuff like that. As NSX is a perfect example if you want to make a lot of power. And I'd like to get more data on the turbo sizing so that we can see, hey, this thing is responsive on a 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0. Obviously, the bigger that we go, the better the response is going to be. But what happens when we go down to a 3.5 liter that is not making as much, certainly low speed, naturally aspirated power as the bigger motors are? So let's find out what happens. And then we have a broader range of knowledge. Hey, look, it still works down here. So it will certainly work on anything that you're trying to do, which brings us to our discussion topic for tonight. That is Destroke motors. The photo that I have up is actually the world famous Destroke LS3. It's much more common for people to actually do this and much less expensive for people to do this with a 6-liter block as an aluminum LS3 block. Quite honestly, if you have an LS3, just keep it as an LS3. That will make all the power that you want and will rev as high as you want it to rev it. That's not going to stop it from revving. You got to fix your valve train and stuff to get it to rev. But that's not too hard now. Guys, lots of guys going to 8,000 RPM without any problem. Destroking it makes it different and unique and cool, but it doesn't have it make it any more power. And that's a common misconception. Oh, but we can rev it now. We can rev it, make power. No, you can just make it smaller and have it make less power. Now, there is a reason for guys, and I know guys will chime in about, hey, I want to rev it and I want to do that. And I understand that. I understand the allure of RPM on a motor. I'm 100% with you. I just want you to understand that if you rev a 6-liter 8,000 and you rev a D-stroke 6-liter to 8,000, one of them is going to be making more power, and it's not going to be the littler motor. It's going to be the bigger motor. And you won't have any trouble getting the 6-liter to rev there or the 5.3 or the 6.2. They will all do that if you give them the things that they need to rev that high. The bore and stroke stuff is really, really low on the list of things that's required to get it to rev high. The reason that I put it up there, I always have to bring that up because so people understand it while we're going in. Most of the people that are here are the live crew. They understand it. They understand. We've talked about that many times. But the other thing is that motor, what a lot of guys don't know is that motor, when we did it, I wanted to run to 8,000 RPM. As it turned out, given what we've done with the junkyard now, it's like I did all of this stuff, short travel lifters and special springs and setting them up so that the coil bind height was exactly right and getting the right camshaft with the right stability lobes and all of these things. And we've already run the junkyard 5.3 from the wrecking yard, the little 5.3, a lot at 7,700. And I don't think 8,000 would be a problem at all. I don't know how many it would do like that, but it would certainly do it. It would certainly do it for, a few dyno sessions. So, it will do that. And it's not a function of the stroke. But in doing that 8,000 RPM motor, I did a lot of other testing with it that a lot of guys don't know about. One of them is that I ran a turbo on it. The other thing that we did is we ran this thing with cathedral port heads, we put the airflow research heads on there, which work very, very well. They're more than enough to support the 600 plus horsepower that we were making with that combination. But we also ran LS3 ported heads, rec ports. I think that these are trick flow heads. And then we ran both of them with tunnel rams or with high rams on them. They're tunnel rams. Ran both of them with those on there. And to kind of see, we were thinking, well, maybe we're making enough power now where the cathedral ports, I mean, the airflow research has flowed over 300, so they would support the power level that we're at. But maybe having heads that flow another 10 or 20 or whatever CFM, maybe we'll throw in some extra power there. There was also a chamber size difference between the LS3 heads and the cathedral port heads. So we lost compression, maybe picked up some airflow, and we didn't make any more power with the rec port heads in that case. But in doing all that testing, the other thing that we did was I ran that de-stroked motor with a turbo. And so that people understand, the people that don't really understand what's going on with turbo stuff, that the de-stroke motor, turbos don't like de-stroke motors any more than any other kind of motor. Turbos like motors. And so if you have a motor, it makes an NA power curve, you add a turbo to it, forget what it is, forget what the displacement is, forget what the bore and stroke is, forget what camshaft you have, what cylinder heads, what intake manifold you have. It's going to do something naturally aspirated. And then when you add boost to that, it's just going to do that same thing, just more of it. It's going to be multiplied by whatever the boost pressure is, whatever the pressure ratio is, it's going to be multiplied by that. So forget about what you're trying to do. What's the most effective cam? What's the most effective heads? What's the most effective intake manifold? You choose all of those things, I would argue, for a different reason. And that's what I was talking about in the description for this video, because I get the argument that I get from the, self-proclaimed professional engine builders that I don't understand because they know how to make power. And that's it. Oh, we're trying to make as much power as possible because we really go racing. No, you're not. You're not trying to make as much power as possible. The people that are making as much power as possible, and even those guys are never using all of the power for all of the race. Top Fuel is the only place in racing that makes as much power as possible. That's the only place. And they are not even using all of that power for the whole length of the track. They can only put the power down that they make for about the last, 10% of the track. That's when they can feed all the power in. They're not flipping the clutch. They're not managing traction, basically, so that they can actually use all the power. So in every other form of racing, no matter what you're doing, even if you're just grudge racing where there are no limits and you could put together something that makes as much power as possible, you're still limited by something. You're limited by displacements or turbos or budget. In almost every other form of racing, you're limited by something. All of those things. You're limited by displacement or turbo sizing or RPM or whatever. Even in Formula One, I would argue that Formula One isn't trying to make as much power as possible. They're not trying to make the biggest peak power output that they can out of that motor, because that might not be that most peak power, and then the corresponding power curve that goes with that might not be the thing that gets them around the track the fastest. I mean, you could want to make as much power everywhere as possible. That's a really good goal, especially for that form of racing. But a guy on the track, and that's what I always ask him, we want to make as much power as possible. So we want that. In this discussion, it was about camshafts. There's an optimum camshaft for turbos. I'm like, no, there's not. There's an optimum turbo for what you're trying to do. But with that turbo, there's about a bajillion camshafts that will get to whatever that turbo will do. And they don't understand. You're just not trying to make lots of power. I'm like, no, one of us is. One of us understands this. If you have 1,000 horsepower turbo, there's like 500 camshafts that I could put in there that will make 1,000 horsepower. And you can't put a camshaft in there that's going to make 1,100 horsepower if the turbo only supports 1,000 horsepower. So really, we're talking about making 1,000 horsepower. If we want to make more than that, then we could try something else. We can add another one of those turbos, and then now we can make 2,000 horsepower. If you want to change the RPM where you make that power, we can talk about that. We can talk about different intake manifolds. We can talk about different cam timing, but the cam timing still does what the cam timing does. NA, now we're running out to 7,500 or 8,000 RPM. And now that is elevated by the boost because you've just added turbos, because the turbos will do that. Yada, yada, yada. So this is much power as possible. That's not a thing. And unless you tell me you're building a Top Fuel car, you are limited by something, and you're not making as much power as possible. Because I guarantee you, whatever motor you've made and you've put together, there's a way to make more power than that. And so you didn't make as much power as possible. That's what I would argue. Hopefully the guys that were here today got to see the stream, and that's going to be a more common thing now. We're going to be able to do interviews. I talked to Brian Tooley about doing an interview, so we're scheduling one around his schedule. And then I'm going to get together. I'm going to make a list with people. In fact, you guys can throw it up there and let me know who are some people that you'd like to see on the interview list, so I can reach out to some of the guys. I mean, there are guys like Billy Godbold and Lake and there's lots of guys. I like to talk to John Causey, Jeff Smith. I mean, there's lots of guys. Chad, I definitely want on here, and Chad's got to be a drinking game one if we have Chad on there. But there's going to be a lot of good guys on there. So we want to get a list together of people, and I'll just try to schedule those, because with this type of streaming that we're doing, where I'm interviewing somebody, there has to be there's more preparation than there is for this type that we're doing. We have to get together, because I like to show in the stream, there are lots of things that I can go grab onto and show you. So now I'll be able to show you, hey, look, when I'm talking about a power curve and this camshaft does this, the low buck truck camshaft does this, and then it did this under boost, and it did this with a stock cam, and all these things. While I'm talking about it, you don't have to just imagine it. You can see it. When I tell you about the Omni, I could show you a picture of the Omni, or in video clips and all kinds of stuff. So I could show you, like I showed the nitrous going today. And so, and I'm going to have to put together probably short snippets of video to show you, because for some reason this thing is not allowing me to go grab JPEGs and things. So I have to put together but the workaround stuff, that's not a big deal. We're able to do that, but we're able to have both people on there, and we're able to talk and both of us tell stories and answer questions. And so it's pretty good. The nice thing, having other guys on there that have specialized in the things that they specialize in, that would be awesome. That way they can also answer questions. You guys can answer questions to them. Matt would be good. I'd like to have Matt on there. I was on his thing, and his was fun. Ask Tom Cruise to stop by. I have a 6 degrees of separation from Tom Cruise story that I might tell after drinks or something, which is kind of funny. I almost got to fly in one of his planes. I was offered that, so it was pretty cool. That doesn't make me cool at all. It just was a circumstance thing. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of good guys. There'll be no shortage of that, because there's so much like cool and interesting talent out there that, guys, like I said, that specialize in things. I want to talk to the guys from Lingenfelter with their 427 stuff that they're doing. There's just a lot of good people, and a lot of people that would be interested. Cam Motion, yeah, those guys are great. The guys from Elgin. There's back in the day, McLaren tested the Lamborghini V12. Senna loved it, but didn't like how peaky it was. Yeah, he's talking about the different motors. So that will be good, and I'll be excited about doing those things. Also, because it's something different for us, so that you guys, Freiberger would be great, and Dulcich, Brule would be awesome. There's just so many, so many good people that would be fun. Because one of the good things about these guys, especially guys that have been, anybody that's been racing has lots of cool stories, but anybody that's been in this industry like Freiberger and stuff, Freiberger's got all kinds of weird stuff. Lots of like rock and roll stuff and all kinds of things that he's done and his family has done. It's really, really cool. And Dulcich is always good. Dulcich is a good character. And Brule, I love, he's got lots of stuff. I don't know if he'll tell all of them, but he's got a lot of, and even Rick, the guys from West Tech, there's, like I said, there's lots of good ones. We can talk about, guys can talk about tuning, and we can talk about, I'd like to get Robert from Force Performance, talk about turbos and stuff. I think we could have some good conversations on turbo stuff, because he's done a lot of cool stuff. And the thing that I like is going outside of this is I like talking to people that have different experiences than I do. I'd like to do, I want people that have drag race Evos or whatever, anything else that I haven't experienced. I want them to talk about that. Hey, look, when we did this, we put this size turbo on there, and it spooled up to this and did this, and all kinds of magic stuff that I don't have any experience with. If we want to talk about 1 liter sprint turbo stuff, see, I could talk to the Hudson boys. That would be awesome, because they've done some, and I love that stuff. So it would be good. It would be awesome. So we got to get a poll going here. Okay, do you like the new streaming interview format that we're going to be doing? So you gotta jump on board. Okay, Lunchbox, Winston, Jet, thumbs up, everybody. Just watched the last live with Jimmy. Definitely a good watch for anybody who didn't see it. Yeah, Jimmy's really good people. In excess, dyslexic version. 331, Jason Disney, what's up? Is there more crank journal overlap in a 4.8 compared to a 5.3? Where is the overlap coming from? Gentlemen, we gather for our daily dose of knowledge. And then we come see Richard. Let's bow our heads and pray to the Turbo Jesus. Words of wisdom. Turbos like motors, they do. Almost like a power adder. RPMs, good springs to avoid valve float. Yes, springs are important. Spring setup is important. As I said, when we did the 8,000 RPM thing, we took a look at camshafts, and we took a look at camshaft stability along with the cam and spring package stability. And then we went to the setup stability of making sure that they're shimmed properly for coil bind clearance, not necessarily for rate, because that's not, sometimes more rate exaggerates a problem or creates a problem, a frequency problem, and not necessarily at the highest RPM where you would expect valve float. Sometimes in the middle part, it's magic. It really is. Texas Speed, Matt Happel. Yep. Yeah, Cletus would be good. Ask Tony. Yeah, I would be happy to have Tony on here. Or even better actually would be David Fizard. Back in the day, McLaren tested the Lamborghini V12. Senna loved it, but didn't like how peaky it was. He wanted more mid-range. Cut top end to beef up the middle. It was quicker. That's the goal of them when they're doing it, is that they want to have the thing that, particularly in Formula One, where they have the best like lap time. The thing that produces that is the thing, regardless of the other, smaller goals, like most peak power, most peak torque, whatever the thing is. No, lap time. This is what we care about. So we want the quickest pit stop. We want the best tire management. We want all of these things that you're focused on. And that's a lot in Formula One, that we want all of that there because we want that time. Time is our enemy. Jonathan from Grubworm, that would be cool. I don't know him. I've never met him, but I obviously like what he's doing. Diameter of the journal. The diameter of the journal of the main journal is the same on a 4.8 and a 5.3. Lake Speed. Yep. Lake and Junior and Senior. How about a factory designer who explains what factory motors are and why they are the way they are? That would be interesting. I don't know that the designer could tell you all of that, because a lot of times that's compartmentalized. So you get guys that are doing the electronics portion of it or the tuning portion of it. You get guys that are doing developing the crankshafts or cylinder heads or intake manifolds or those sorts of things. So I don't know how separated all that is, but it'd be cool to talk to different guys. I don't know that there's one person there that could answer all of the things of why they did what they did. Eric, you got laundry going? It would be awesome to see you utilize the cylinder pressure tuning data on the new FT700. Brian Tooley has cylinder pressure data, so he can share that. In fact, I'm going to write that down so that we can talk about that. Brian Tooley and I really could have something once or twice a week for the rest of eternity and not run out of stuff to talk about. So there's a lot of cool things. What is crank journal overlap? Yeah, Dan, you got me. How about daily driver horsepower increase? That was an original muscle car. Okay, tell me the motor and chassis, I guess. The chassis is not that important, but the motor. And then tell me what year it is and what power it makes, and then I'll tell you what we can do to make it better. This would be good for talking on what they ran into trying to make the Godzilla work for them. Yeah, there's I mean, him just telling weird stories of him flying the helicopter and all kinds of stuff. They're just nothing but good there. The diameter of the main journal. As viewed from the front of the crank that overlaps the rod journal. Is that the new 3/4 race crank? We tore apart our 302 Windsor we got from a total Fox body. We found 30 over pistons, Yellow Terror rockers that use the connected shafts, freshly rebuilt bottom end. Score, man, that's good. Graham, love the videos. Still new to the subject. I'm thinking about doing a Destroke Turbo LH6. Not trying for crazy power, just 500 to 600. I like to have a red line around 8,000. How feasible is that? It's not hard at all, but it's not necessary to destroke it. The only thing you'd be making is a 4.8. Because an LH6 is going to be a 5.3. Did you put a 4.8 crank rods and pistons in it, and then you'd have an aluminum 4.8. But it's not necessary to run 8,000. And also, if you're going to run 8,000 for a turbo deal, you shouldn't, unless you absolutely have to have that RPM, because a turbo 5.3 on your LH6 will make a lot more power. It will be a lot more responsive. It will be a lot more fun to drive on the street. I don't know what you're doing with it, but in almost every way possible, other than the cool sound that it makes at 8,000 RPM, a turbo 5.3 will be better than a turbo 4.8. Putting a 5.3 in an S10, what would be a good turbo for 600 to 700 horsepower with a stock cam? You're gonna have to run a lot of boost to get that. It's possible, but the boost pressure is going to be very high for a stock cam. But 700 horsepower is still GT45 territory. Supposedly is stronger and something preferred on big boost applications. What is stronger, a 4.8? Yep, 4.8 is a Destroke 5.3. Are the lifters on your website Chinesium? See mixed reviews on L7s. No, you don't have to worry about that. Those lifters are 100% perfect. Crank overlap is a byproduct of stroke. I missed the Magnum talk today. Power is out today. You're running smaller turbo knowing your RPMs are going to be 6,000 plus. No, I run turbos sized for the power output, not for the RPM. No, there's a set that had a product name that started with the letter M that was discussed last year to avoid, was it Moroso? Has Brian Tooley shared information on his new LS3 heads that are coming out? I haven't seen anything on the LS3 heads. He has shared information on the cannon valve heads, which are new. If crank overlap was a thing, wouldn't they care about it in Top Fuel or any other form of racing? I need lifters again. I'd rather buy stuff off Richard's page. Richard really loved the B16 video you made. I was surprised it only lasted to, I think, was 420 horsepower. Yeah, stuff that we did back in the day, I think I could do better on. But looking at the unsupported deck that we ran, maybe there was movement there. Maybe it was not that. Maybe it was something else. Maybe I could do better now. Also wondered about odd fire Buick V6 was even fire. Injectors too. Yeah, we have injectors there. It was a good score. Bought the entire car for $300. That is a good deal. Just the rockers are worth more than that. We already took the motor T5 and rear end with drive out. I've got a Summit F303 Plus GT35 turbos. Should we limit the boost around 8, 10, 12? I see that you're already not limiting yourself. You're already stepping up. I stick to stock GM performance stuff. want to replace the rings and regap for boost. Should I run plasma moly rings? I think that those will work. I don't think what you're doing is going to need like a Hellfire ring or anything. The Hellcat pump and injectors are looking good. Getting ready to push some air through it. Yep, you got to have enough fuel. So those pumps are good and the injectors are good. Why would you destroke for RPM? See if Morris runs 9,500 with his SMX and does just fine. Yeah, and even mountain motors, which have an ungodly amount of stroke in them and piston speed. It's just not, like I said, an 8,000 RPM LS, particularly with the right kind of exhaust on it, sounds amazing. There's no doubt about that. But what guys want is I want an 8,000 RPM motor on a budget that lasts forever. And you can get that, but it's really expensive because you got to buy it new from the factory and it's going to say BMW M something on it. I thought the Canavels were LS3 design. No, LS3 design is the same as all the other LSs. A Canavalve is a different design, completely different than what all the factory stuff is. The automotive world needs variety. That's right. I'm a fan of anything with a motor, forklifts, shifter carts, oval track, Nuremberg, the Nürburgring, the definition car guy. Would the red light change between LM7s if they both have different superchargers on them? Or is the all RL more tied to valve train components? Yeah, the blower is not going to dictate the maximum engine speed of the motor. It will dictate where they make power, and they do that for not the reasons that you think. It has nothing to do with, like, you have to have the valve train to be able to do it to begin with. If you don't have the valve train, none of them will do anything. So if you have a stock valve train in it, and let's say it valve floats at 6,500, I mean, you could do that just by putting roller rockers on it, and it'll valve float before that. But the thing we can say about superchargers is short runner intakes, which are usually associated with positive displacement blowers, tend to want to push power output higher in the RPM range. Also, a centrifugal supercharger, even with a longer runner intake manifold, tends to want to make peak power at a little higher engine speed because it has a rising boost curve. So you're kind of artificially increasing the efficiency of the motor. And so it will make power higher with a centrifugal blower on it than it will naturally aspirated. I thought Canavels were a big block Chevy thing. They are. They're also a small block Chevy thing and also an LS thing. Canavels have been out for LSs for quite a while. I think Edelbrock had some. My 5.7 engine that I purchased has BTR lifters. I will let you know how it is by July of next year. Driving it in the 07 Classic Silverado. Okay. Scrolling. I found an old picture of you, Richard. You had a full head of hair standing next to an 88 Mustang Silver State Classic 1991. I probably have that photo, and I still have that car. Original owner. Bought it in November of 87. If I do LS7 lifters on an LQ4 with a low buck truck cam and springs, would I need different push rods? Not normally. The thing that I don't know about are the LS7 lifters. I need to measure them ideally versus what you have. But I think the dimension from the cup where the push rod sits down to the tip of the roller is the same. Can I use the stock push rods on my Summit Cam? I don't know. Yeah, and you do need to measure them because I just don't know what the base circle is of the Summit Cams. I would expect them to make them the same or very close within the range of adjustability of the preload of the lifter, but I can't swear to that. I don't expect her to live for an hour. I want the car to have good response and decent power. It's a big block thing, but CAD has had Canavalves for LS for quite some time. It's very expensive. Yeah, Nürburgring and Nuremberg are different. They are. And they're famous for different things. Titanium for high revs. Titanium valves definitely can help with valve train weight, if that's a limitation. 429, 460 Fords, Arcana valve. Yep. So are Cleveland's. I think GM only provides the L7 lifter for stock replacement on AC Delco parts catalogs. Oh, Dan said, Dan already threw the Cleveland thing out there, man. I'm way too slow. Too slow. Correction, it's Edelbrock. Yep. Well, like you said, if it had wider ring gap, it would have lasted. If you ever do one thing, a B20 engine, it's fairly cheap to get. I thought about doing a B20, B16 head for my CRX. Then the thing that I like about those, even more than the LS VTEC hybrid on a B18 is nice, but it does lower the compression relative to a B16. I like the B20 because it's bigger and has torque. You know, let's face it, a VTEC motor, even though they have a cool cam trickery thing going on, it feels better at 2 liters than it does at 1.6. I know the L92 doesn't have DOD FM, but do people block off the holes or just replace the seals on the stock valley cover? I'm buying the last part of my engine. Well, if it doesn't have AFM or DOD and you have a valley cover on it that has seals on it already, you don't have to worry about that. I bought my 70 Trans Am in 1994. Very nice. That was a smart buy. I believe I'm the 4th owner. Very nice. L7 lifters are supposed to be the same. They have fully encased roller is the difference. Instead of the ears that supposedly break off under high loads. Just titanium retainers at 500 to 700 RPM, given the rest of the engine is up to snuff. I've never seen that much, but titanium retainers are good. And it would depend on the titanium retainer size that you're starting with. Like on an LS, the going from a steel retainer to a titanium retainer doesn't change the valve train weight very much because they're small to begin with. And then also, this would have been a good question for Brian when he's on here, but when he did testing on the Spintron with a titanium retainer versus a steel retainer, the steel retainer, it was actually better. I've never been the first owner on anything. I'm highly allergic to depreciation. I think my car has depreciated enough. In fact, it's probably worth more now than it was when I bought it. I was a young lad at 10. I had a go-kart with a 3 horsepower engine and a Corvette fiberglass body. Very nice. Does overhead cam help for higher RPM? Yes. Overhead cam stuff is better. You don't have push rods. You don't have heavy lifters. What's the limitation of the GT40 heads with spring update? I don't know what you mean by limitation. I have lots of videos up where they make power, and what they do, they don't flow as well as a set of airflow research heads is one limitation. We quit running titanium retainers in cup because they'd wear out and trash the oil. They do. There is material transfer, and it leaves that material in the oil. Aside from compression, any benefit to different combustion chamber sizes? Well, that would be the first one, but I wouldn't argue about combustion chamber size. I would look at that in comparison or in connection with other things. Like a lot of times you want a smaller chamber so that you can run a flat top piston and then still get the compression ratio that you want. That's usually a better combination than having a dome piston. Is the F22 any decent? I don't have a lot of dyno testing on F22 stuff, but I would just say yes because it's a Honda. I've never owned anything long enough for the value to go up. Every other car that I can't say that. I'm going to say every other car that I've owned has gone down in value. The Ferrari didn't go down, and the Ford GT didn't go down. And almost everything else that I bought is I sold it for less than I bought it for. And I wouldn't sell the Mustang, but I think that it's probably up there now. It might not be. Is a Fox body worth, like, I think I bought it for just under 12 grand when I bought it new. Makes a difference. Pontiac V8 small race Chevy V8 valve spring sizes. Might try with the Z06. I feel like they bottomed out in value, but people see me driving it and act like I rolled up in a Lambo. I feel like they might go up. What year Z06 is it? Look, it says I'm on YouTube. 2007. Okay. Ooh, so that has the LS7 in it. I didn't know what year they changed the from the what was the previous Z06? That was the 400 horsepower or less, depending on the year before that. The 5.7, right? Z06, a special C5 package. I'm still waiting for 930 prices to drop. Yep. You need to start looking at 912s, Dan. Maybe 914s. I'll bet those are not even cheap right now. Although it could be just because it's cammed and bright yellow. Yeah, it has that cammy sound. I need to drop some weight. It's affecting my left heel, plantar fasciitis. Eyesight's 20/20. That's good. C5 Z06 ended in 04. When do you think you're going to talk to BTR publicly? I mean, when is he going to be on an interview? I think it's not till next week. I have a 302 with full-length headers with 2-inch collectors. Have you ever seen any like that? I don't remember. Do you know what the primary size is on that? 2-inch collector seems small to me. I also saw yesterday the chassis dyno one of the red Silverado and the story of the guy that got mad about his low dyno numbers. Oh, the live feed. Yeah, I mean, we just helped him. It's all good, man. Yeah, the C5 was 405, and before that, I think it was 385 or something like that. Building a turbo LQ4, forged internals for drag racing, starting off with 317 heads, planning to change springs and upgrade trunnions. What type of valve material do you recommend? Honestly, for what you're doing with the head that you're doing, I would just put stock valves in it. You could do stainless stuff and you could go crazy and put Inconel exhaust valves in it, but there's no need to do that if you're drag racing it because you don't get it hot during that period of time. You don't get it hot enough. And quite honestly, if it's a stock bottom end LQ4, you're going to break something there before you have to worry about the valves. Maybe the question isn't limitation, but power output, full bolt on with carb and single plane. Well, Lee, just look at the or Lidl Raptor. Go look at all the videos I have up of anything that we've run with GT40 heads. I think the Z06 is starting to go back up, at least in Tennessee, in East Tennessee. So it's regionally specific. Is it just me or is the stream buffering? It shouldn't be buffering. Have you done any testing with step headers? Yes. Or tuned length? Yes. I've made lots of my own headers with adjustable lengths to demonstrate what adjustable primary length does. Glad my knees are still good. Yep. Jimmy Diesels didn't use the blower as a supercharger, but as a blower to get the air through the engine. No boost. Not even any boost in the crankcase. Did they create vacuum in there, Dan? I've been toying with the idea of selling my Mark III Supra and getting a Z06. W series had no combustion chambers in the heads. Are you ever going to test any one of those? I almost got to score a W series. There was a 348, but a guy had snagged it already. He even got the 4-speed transmission. It came out of some truck. But that would have been cool. I'd like to run one of those. I just never find them in the wrecking yard. Muscle does have memory. That's why they call it muscle memory. I need to get back into calisthenics. Yeah, you got to go out and exercise, man. Hey, the first step is the hardest one. Go out, exercise, get out in the sun, even in the snow, whatever you're doing. Even in your room, just get some weights, do whatever. Trying to find a Chevette, but they're getting harder and harder to find. Not looking to spend $2,000 on a $500 car. They might not be $500 cars anymore unless they're rusted through. I recall the last video, I watched factory heads made over 300. Okay, let's go take a look at this, shall we? Turbo L98 cams. Yeah, what's up? Small block Ford, 302 results. I don't think we did that on that one. I think that they were 330 something or others. And we're scrolling. Big head test number 2. AFR Canfield GT40X. So it was on the other one. 302. Holder ultimate head test. Ultimate. You can't get any better than that. Finals. Let's see. GT40P. That one made 336 versus 306. So it made about 30 more. The curve's a little jaggedy, so I think we might be able to do a little better than that. But that was a 306. It was like a 30 over thing. It had an Extreme Energy 264 cam, an RPM air gap, 650 Demon. And I'm pretty sure that was a flat top piston with valve release. So 330-ish. You might be able to do better than that. Like I said, that the way that curve is doesn't look like it's the best sort of effort that we could have made. Our late 70s 302 heads junk. I have a 78 302 Mustang. None of those are really superior. The 69 351s are kind of good. The GT40 and GT40Ps are good. All the rest of them, not so much. Unless it's a Boss 302, then those are really cool. Are you going to back to the Silver State Classic? Do they even run the Silver State anymore? I don't even know if they run it anymore. It would be fun to take the Mustang back there. I like to take the Mustang back there with just an aluminum NA 5.3. Probably make as much. We could get it to make as much as the supercharged version did. Maybe not quite that much, but back on the interview front, I would like to see some old retired engine builder, drag racer, some legend dropping pearls of wisdom, not just selling something. Yeah, anybody that has a story, it would be cool. I think Calvin would be awesome. Calvin and his dad. 348 409s had the issue with boring, also increasing chamber size and reducing compression. Muscle memory is how you play guitar and how you do most martial arts and boxing and everything else. It's good I don't have a white collar job. I get bored at the desk all day. Put 8 sleeves in a 409. Putting those in is a job. Drive by wire. Do you mean on Supra? I have already shaved head and put on head studs. Dustin White said he gained 15 horsepower on his LSA car going from LS3 to a 416. I don't see how that could be possible, but it's crazy if it is. That seems odd to me. I mean, he didn't even gain 1 horsepower per cubic inch. That doesn't seem right. Was he spinning the blower really, really slow and not feeding the extra displacement? Did the boost drop way down? If you had muscle, it won't take much working to get it to recover. I do lift heavy steel and aluminum landing gear parts to move and manipulate to prep for overhaul. If you are exercising at work, that's good. That's better than sitting here behind the computer like I'm doing right now. Lee, the camshaft on that was a 264, not a 274. We didn't use a 274 until we went to the 331 stroker in the next group of heads. I installed granite. That's good. It's a pretty healthy number. I'd be happy with that power to boosting. Kind of makes sense since the supercharger only moves X amount of air. It doesn't move X amount of air. if you put it on a bigger motor and the boost goes down, the airflow goes up. Unless there's a limitation on the front side of that, but probably not. Cleavor, I'm also lacking cardio. The only thing good about 409 is not having to use ring compressor to get the pistons back in. Richard, could you interview somebody about building our carbs for boost? Yeah, that would be good. Brule might know. Well, that Brule might not know. Yeah, I would like to talk to somebody about that. We could talk to Kevin at CSU. I got like number 47. Which one are you? Crazy Foot. Who is that? Who is that addressed to? $409, $409. Do you like the new streaming interview format? 99%. So there's 9% of you that don't like that? Really? Richard, thank you for chatting. Yes, I'll always try to provide information. Would adding a bigger displacement blower move the red line? Why are you changing the red line? Do you make videos that are more in detail engine disassembly, assembly? I've only ever seen you dyno videos. I like the dirty work videos. Well, I do all of the work on the dyno. So I'm the one assembling and disassembling everything that we do on the testing on the dynos. I don't usually do engine builds because that's not what I do. I don't just put an engine together and dyno it. Man, that would make life a lot easier. I put an engine together and dyno it, and then that's the baseline. That's the start of then all the chaos that's going to happen with a bunch of cylinder heads and a bunch of intake manifolds and camshafts and all kinds of things. I think 9% of people would say they don't want a free turbo. It kind of seems like that sometimes. The people who hit the like button and making the people who didn't ask themselves, what number will I get? Smash that like button. That's right. Oh, 50-50. Giddy up. Do the like. Do the like. Richard, have you ever boosted a high compression Ford 427 with a high lift cam? I have boosted a 427 stroker small block Ford, like a 351 Windsor base stroker. It did, I think, have a pretty good size cam in it. And I think we did it with a Vortec. So yes. I like that Jimmy was listening instead of waiting. Immediately fixed issues on the store. Jimmy was very, very excited. I can tell you that about the video that we did today because it wasn't necessarily an interview with him. We were just on it together as a learning experience to figure out how to manipulate stuff. But he loved the feedback that he got from all of you guys, from everybody on the live feed about things about the store. Because obviously we don't always see that stuff, even when we're talking to each other and going on there and going, well, what about this? Getting the feedback from people that actually use it and then find things or don't find things that they want. That's just, he was just amazed. He loved it because he said, hey, I got more things fixed today than ever. It was great. I want to see a low buck 427 camera build. I'll put that right next to the low buck 91730 build too. We could do those together, I think, because they're such low buck that we could probably do two of them. What's your favorite build? I don't have a favorite one. My favorite one is usually the next one, whatever that is. I boosted a few Windsors to oblivion. I wish now that I would have put a 351 in my Mustang. I barely faked my way through last year. Have you ever done any research on a Chrysler 3.8? I have not. I have never even looked at the engine specs on one of those. You have a video of the boosted 427. I think it might help me find a boost timing baseline. There's not going to be data on that, but if you tell me what your combination is, I can tell, and what the octane is, I can tell you what kind of timing that we ran. Building my very first LM7 is a 2005. Was planning low budget build swap until I opened up to start a cam swap. Ended up replacing cam bearings and 6 rocker arms and push rods and resealing it. Were all of those things problematic, Justin? Were they all bad? What's your opinion on the best supercharger for an LS engine? There isn't one. That thing, the best thing, doesn't exist. just like the best cam doesn't exist, or the best heads or best intake manifold. You just have to tell me what you're trying to achieve, and then we can help you achieve that. Richard, I'm new to tuning. I'm trying to reduce breaking of the parts. Yep. Start out with less timing and more fuel. And I'm wondering how the risk is on high load situations like launch or coming out of a corner versus top speed. I don't think that top speed is as hard as stuff as accelerating is. And I don't think that, I don't know. I don't know about the load on top speed, because top speed, where you're, and it depends on how long you're doing it for, might be like a stationary load at 1 RPM up against basically an aerodynamic wall. So that might be bad for it. But usually when we're doing that at Bonneville, we're at high RPM. And so we're in an area where detonation is not going to be an issue. So if we have managed our air fuel and our timing correct, and we have our charge temperature right, because we're running a turbo thing with ice water on it, if we have all of those things and we're managing temperature of the motor and temperature of the air, it just wasn't a problem with us. Coming out of a corner is usually lower speed and gear dependent. I think top speed probably is going to be harder on that. Couldn't have done it without YouTube videos in regards to additioning timing, power levels. Let's see. 2031 is the magic number here. My truck will be 25 and I don't have to test anymore. I can pull the emissions off. That's a little ways down the road. And I think the only low buck build left is a 455 Olds. Somebody offered to send me an LSA, I think today. They were asking about that. Working on my LM7. I have one blower. Eventually, I want to add another. I'm curious what would be needed other than fuel when it comes to running 2 and maybe the neighborhood of RPM. So tell me what you're trying to achieve, what kind of power output you want, and tell me what the motor configuration is. Like, what have you done to your LM7 and how much power you want to make? Out of 351 of my Mark 7, I got us 91 and 04 left. Everything else, sold everything else for now. I was thinking Olds 455 or a Cadillac 500. Rock arms and push rods were worn. Cam was mint. Just upgrading it to the Truck Norris cam. Okay. Top speed's pretty hard on stuff. It is for the land speed guys that are doing streamliners and trying to go 500. Planning on a Bonneville trip, that would be good. I recommend that to everybody. Every car guy should go out and do that. 427 Windsor, Novi 2200, E85, intercooled. That's a good size cam. 11-to-1, Super Victor, coil on plug, big Dominator ECU. My recommendation is to run that thing NA and see what timing it likes, and then base your timing off of that. My guess is did you tell me what heads that thing has on it? If you tell me what cylinder heads I have in it, but most of those Windsors are going to be like, let's say 34 or 35 degrees NA. It might even be more than that on E85. And so we would be in the probably low to mid 20s in timing on that, particularly with an intercool and particularly with the 85. And you might sneak more than that in there. And that's at the horsepower peak. That's at the top. What engine combination have you built that you're very proud of? There's been lots of them. I'm excited that the Sprint Turbo set a bunch of records. I'm excited that the Civic set a bunch of records that we went. I mean, it still is, I think, the world's fastest Honda Civic. We went 226 in it. So I've done a lot of cool stuff that I like, but not as cool as the next thing that I'm going to do. Spun a rod bearing on my LY6, sloppy stage 2 cam, 94 vet. If I was to go with a 6.2 459 cam, or is there a better wrong cam in the 231 duration? Yeah, that's not a go-to cam really. It's just one that I had that we used a lot of. But if you tell me what kind of power you're trying to make, like, did you like it in that LY6? It's better than a sloppy stage 2 cam, I can tell you that. The biggest danger drag racing to an engine is the hard launch and braking shutdown. I have a Porsche, essentially a 951. I have an LH6 with a DOD deleted and a Holly Dominator setup. That's cool. Technically, it's a modified 924. I have a book on 924s and 944s. I am a 924 owner. I had a 924. We painted it yellow, and we did top speed testing with it, and it didn't go very fast. And I always wanted a turbo for it. We did some stuff, though. We did like a ported head on it, a ported big valve head on it, did an extrude hone intake manifold, I think, on it, and maybe a header. It never really gained very much power. We didn't really have any tuning for it. I might rebuild the LR4 as an iron L33 if the cylinder walls aren't damaged from the seize up in November. Victor Jr. ported by Total Engine Airflow. Okay, those guys do good stuff. I don't know about that Victor Jr. head. That wasn't an amazing head to begin with, but the ported versions I've seen have done really good things. Is timing field dependent or compression or cylinder head or a little bit of everything? Yes, it's I would say it's more chamber, but maybe also compression. And then the amount of timing that the chamber wants is different from what your octane will allow. What you want is to have enough octane to give the amount of timing that the cylinder head wants to make maximum power. And if you don't give it that, then you're going to be reducing power. How much timing should we consider to pull out when running 93 once you decided to go boosted? I don't ever run these things on pump gas. Good starting point, not looking for the most power, but to keep it from blowing up. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that on pump gas. How much does it cost to have an LS dyno? You'd have to talk to whatever shop you're talking about. It depends on whether it's carbureted and fuel injected and whatever how much time it takes, how hard the setup is. There's a lot of things that influence that. How often does the most favorite dyno room carbs need to be serviced or refurbished? I can only imagine a new carb gets shuffled to ensure the prior carb is performing or not. Do you mean the carburetors at Westech? We don't. I don't think they've ever been rebuilt. The ones that we're using, the thing that's happened though is like with Holley, who supplied all the carburetors to Westech. They had a bunch of Holley carburetors, and then Holley introduces new carburetors, so they send the new ones. So they send the HP versions, and then they run a bunch of HP versions for a long time, and then they send the XP versions, and they run a bunch of XP versions, and then now I think Edelbrock has sent the VRS stuff, so now they're running a lot of VRS stuff. So they haven't taken them out and had them rebuilt. The one exception is that CSU carburetor that Kevin did. We've run that for so long and so much that some of the bolt holes, the holes for the bolts that hold the bowl on, some of those have been kind of stripped, and so that one's been gone through. 1968 GTO 454 Kaufman. I've never done anything with the motor. It just sits in the corner. Truck Norris versus Torker V4 upcoming. I don't know what a Torker V4 is. I don't know what the specs are. I don't know who makes it. I don't know anything about it. So there's not going to be a competition between those camshafts because I don't know about that one. Jeff 2 Hacks told me Kyle lost oil pressure driving, went to 0. Asked if the stock oil pan 1970. Yes, no oil baffles. I just sold my 924 turbo project car. Had to make room for another toy. I would have to say the dogleg trans is a day's worth of driving to get used to. Yeah, that's okay. That's one car. Like, I love the 924. I thought it handled great. I thought it rode great. I thought it was a nice car. I think I would like a 944 better, and especially after being passed by a 944 turbo in my Mustang on the Silver State. I kind of want one of those. But the 924 just needed more power. I mean, it needed, like, if it had another 100 horsepower, it'd have been fantastic. 200 would have been just right. Double blower LM7 has LS7 style lifters, BTR push rods, springs. Cam is 550. So Blake, how much power are you trying to make? A goofball German short hair pointer is ringing the bells on the door to go for a walk. Uh-oh. You should try ATM Innovation Carbs. BTR Truck North versus Texas Speed Torquer. We already ran the BTR versus the Chupacabra. So that's the marketplace competitor for those two. The worst part is letting soft parts dry out on the dyno carbs. Probably see lots of use. They do. They're used every day. So they come off of something and go on something else, sometimes on the same day, and then definitely on the next day they get run again. The one thing you can say is we try to flush all the E85 out of everything before we run. We flush it with 91 so that all that gets out. But if you do leave E85 in a carburetor, like the E85 carburetors, and you take the bowls off, there's definitely deposits in that. The 928 with a 5.4 V8. Yep, that's good. But I wasn't looking for like the 924. It just needed more power. It needed not to be 110 or 20 mile an hour car, whatever it would go. My 924 weighs 2460, something in the neighborhood of 400 horsepower. I haven't done it yet. See, that would be fun. That'd be perfect. Prestige, what's going on, man? Ask away, man, if you have a question, because it's almost time to go. We're going to close out our poll at 89%. Do you like the new stream format? You 11%. Maribera swap with a Duramax NP263, or keep the 300 and drop it in a ZF5 and the BMW. Do the Maribera. I mean, I don't know what you're trying to do with what you have there. Are you trying to race it around so that you need the power that the 4200 has, or do you just need the low speed torque and you're only revving it to 3000 RPM for the 300? What fuel do you run on the dyno? We run 91. Well, I run 91 or E85, and I had in the past run lots and lots of race gas when there was a supplier that supplied race gas. But now on anything boosted, I usually run E85. Got to make 700 horsepower with that setup reliably, bottom end. All I want to do is give it extra ring gap and a single roller chain. You don't need a double roller chain. I'd recommend against it. Where's the RPM where I would need to be to make 700? With a turbo on it, you could make 700 at 6,000 or 6,500 RPM without any problem. I don't know what blowers or blower you have for it, but a torque storm will make 700. A single one will do that. I want to race it off-road occasionally and down the strip. So I'd go with the 4200 then and a turbo. You have an M90. An M90 is not going to do 700. It's not going to even be close to that. Have you tested Pro Max LS heads? I don't think I have. I've tested other stuff from Pro Max. I've tested their big block stuff and their small block Ford stuff, but I don't know that I've ever run an LS head. I was looking at a torque storm. Always need a turbo. Yeah, you could do two of them. That would do it. Got a set of Pro Max 210 Fords, and they're wonderful to stare at. I'm not disappointed. The ones that I ran have worked well. So, the thing is, on a Ford, small block Ford, like the bar's not set very high for the factory ones. So anything that you put in there is going to be way better. The metric for a lot of people would be, how do they compare to an airflow research head? That's a pretty high mark. They're going to be in between there. Have you dyno with E38 ECU? I don't know what that is. My oil cooler was leaking. I'm running an oil cooler less with larger filter. flow rate and fuel line diameter should I go with? You can use a factory fuel rail, and you can use factory fuel lines for all that. A Gen 4 ECU. I don't ever run factory ECUs when I'm dyno testing. We only run aftermarket stuff. I use Holley primarily, but also now we're going to be running a Haltech, and I've run a MS3 Pro and Fast in the past also. A factory ECU takes way too long to load, to reflash and stuff, to load programs on. And so we can't do that on the dyno. I would be forever loading stuff because I make so many tests that it just wouldn't happen. Thomas, I don't really understand your question. I don't know what, are you asking something specific about Fuel Tech? And I don't think I have any experience with them if it's a company, which should tell you right there, right? That I don't have any experience with them. Been driving in the ice and snow all last night. The Jeep pulling people out of the ditch. That's fun to go. If you have a cool 4-wheel drive thing and you go out and save people. Their ECUs. I'd never tried that. I hate waiting for flashes on the side of the road. Do you think you'll ever try Ace's ECU? I don't think I will. We swapped out our E7s to a set of GT40s. I port match, and you'll swore they gain 40 horsepower, saving the 210s for a Ford bottom end. That wouldn't surprise me if I would do the work if I was doing it, I'd just do the work in the bowl, just get a transition in the bowl area. I would do that before I would port match them because I think that there's going to be a much bigger chance of a gain there. And then if you wanted to do something in the combustion chamber, just smooth it out because it's an iron head, so it could use that. We'll take your lunch money and make it our beer money. The factory ECM does have some very good tuning strategies, and you can dial them in pretty quick. You can't load new programs in and tune it the way that we need to on the dyno. That's why we don't use a factory ECM. I did the port match, blended the bowls. Okay, yeah, if you blended the bowls, then good. Yeah, and they are bad. those iron ones are bad. I'd love to know about E67 code on a 4200. Fix the charge pipe with zip ties. I got P59, tuned it. Got my truck running in 30 minutes. Yeah, we can't have 30 minutes. 30 minutes is like 7 changes. I have a dual rail manifold. I use a factory ECU as a way to supplement my fuel needs. What do you mean you have a dual rail manifold? What intake manifold has 2 fuel rails on it? And you don't need to have a custom kind of intake manifold for your power level. A factory truck intake manifold is fine. In fact, it's the one that I would recommend. The power level that you're at is really, really easy. It's just a cam and springs and boost. It's not hard at all. You can load an entire new engine in 5 minutes. Yeah, that's we have to be able to go. Okay, that configuration's done. Now the tune part of it has to be like seconds. It's really fast. I mean, we could get in 5 or 6 pulls or whatever. We can have the thing, a brand new engine on and running and optimized for power in that configuration in 4 or 5 pulls. And then you go in and change headers or change the intake or whatever, and then bring it back up to temperature and do all that. There's time doing all those other things. The tuning part, we can't be waiting for a half an hour or whatever while we're loading a program for tuning. That was one of the things that we went through when we were doing the factory ECU on the L83, which limited the number of tests that we could do. And also on the Coyote was like that. Is there a 3rd gen LSX truck intake? You can get a fast LSXR truck intake. You could get a Trailblazer SS that fits the 3rd gen and the 4th gen stuff, Gen 3 and Gen 4 stuff. Should I keep the single plane intake with boost, or should I swap to a dual plane? A dual plane will be better for the RPM range that you're running. 30 minutes was pretty quick to drop in a cam swap. Yeah, that's all good. We got my low buck cam and springs for 2006 all-wheel drive Trailblazer SS. Going to get full exhaust. There you go. This is what I want possible. You can do what you want, what you're trying to do with a factory ECU. Like if you have that harness and you have the factory ECU, I don't know what this is going in or what car it is or anything like that, but a factory computer will do what you want it to do. You can get a free tune from, if you have the right injector size and all that, you can get that from Matt at Sloppy. TBS for Recport. It's not a Trailblazer SS for Recport. Then that's a cathedral port manifold. So it'd be an LY6 intake or one version of that for the Recport truck one. Wish I had got dual rail intake for my LS for running pump gas on one rail and switch the 85 to other rails. So do you have 16 injectors for that too? Just going with a bigger intake valve, lower red line. You need to not be fascinated about red line stuff anymore. You need to get past that. You need to just make the power that you need to make and the RPM range that you need to make it. Wouldn't get my car tuned at a concrete yard. Recport is MBSS. Are L96 piston valve reliefs deep enough to mill the heads about 30 and run a 224 cam? Yes. You don't have to have a valve relief for that. A flat top is fine. Because it always hits in the same area. It's not going to hit in that valve relief. At least one of them. Do you have an exhaust valve relief or an intake valve relief? It doesn't matter. Whether it's a flat top or a dish piston, it hits on that outer edge, and a 220-something cam is not going to hit. If you're going to dyno with a stock ECU, always make sure you have 5 or 6 tunes ready to load. What dual plane intake? An RPM air gap would be the best one. Or you could do the aftermarket versions of those, or the offshore versions of those, and they work good too. Prestige Peak, you need one tune and calibrate it for the engine. What's the difference between running E85 and pump gas? Well, one of them, you have to flow a lot more fuel with the E85, and then normally you can run more timing and boost with the E85. Now we need the turbo stuff. I know, I'm excited about that. Jimmy and I are both really excited about it. Yeah, Kevin, we run on the L33. We have a flat top piston. It's a 5.3. We have Trick Flow 220 ASCAS heads that have been ported. They've also been milled 30. And we have a BTR Stage 4 LS3 camshaft in it. So where you're at is not going to be an issue. But where you're at is me leaving. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll see you all tomorrow.